Welcome to another 5-minute flip.
What is up, Flip Eponymai? Welcome to your 5-minute flip for May 21st, 2025. So around a year and a half ago, I was officially diagnosed with ADHD. I'll talk a bit about kind of how that process happened. The reason, so since then, I've been kicking around, just talking about it on the podcast sometime as a 5-minute flip, and right now feels like the right time to do that. The reason that I want to do this as a podcast, it may not feel discipleship or spiritual formation related or theological or whatever, but there's definitely some things that I hope help you if you might be struggling with some of these symptoms that I was, or if you know somebody that has ADHD. I've just learned a lot, and I think there's a lot to, as I've talked about depression on the podcast and mental health. ADHD is not the same it's not the exact same thing as a mental health disorder like that, but there is definitely some overlap. And ADHD and depression, anxiety, they can often go together. And so I'm always all for us removing stigmas, particularly in the church. But stigmas, and I think ADHD has a big stigma. I used to have a stigma towards it, but it's a bit different where it may not be a stigma in the sense, let's say depression, anxiety. I don't want to talk about it, publicly. I don't want to admit to it, or I don't know, whatever. We have these sort of stigmas in the church, like you're depressed because you're in sin or you don't pray enough. We've talked about that on other podcast episodes. But with ADHD, at least for me, I know I was buying into a very stereotypical idea of what ADHD was, and I didn't even know, frankly. I learning about it in my own life from my counselor. I didn't even know these things were ADHD symptoms. And so I'll talk about that in a moment as well. And so I start with, an apology to those who have walked with ADHD and sort of this ignorant view that I have had of it. And, my ignorant view, I don't know, just came from when I was a kid. So I'm 42, and growing up in school, ADD, ADHD, I think it was around a little bit as diagnosis for kids. It was not commonly diagnosed. It was not something that we were super familiar with. And I think I mostly gained my knowledge of ADD/ADHD from jokes, from maybe some people that had it who kind of joked around about it. But I think more so it just became sort of a cultural joke. But I pictured usually a boy drinking too much Mountain Dew and is hyper all the time, and the very ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. You think, oh, hyperactivity, like these kids are just these really hyper kids who can't sit still. They have attention deficit. They can't pay attention, so they're hyper and fidgety and twitching. So they're. That's what you think of with ADHD. And so, hang on, I'm gonna grab a drink here. First of all, if that is the way someone struggles with ADHD, it's not at all my place or anyone's place to kind of mock that or joke about it. But once I'll say one thing that's interesting about the ADHD medicine. ADHD medicine is a stimulant, and when I learned that, it was confusing to me because I thought ADHD was kids/adults who were already really hyper, and we think that man, that guy's got ADHD. Look how hyperactive he is. So why would you need more of a stimulant? A stimulant is, caffeine is a stimulant. So Mountain Dew, coffee, why would you need more stimulant? Wouldn't a person that's already hyperactivity, wouldn't they need a depressant? Wouldn't they need something that I can't think of the word. I don't think it's depressant. The opposite of a stimulant. I'm sorry. I'm not a doctor. The word will come to me later, but the type of medicine that slows down your system. Maybe they do call them depressants. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm talking to my counselor, and my counselor is a psychologist, and this was a couple years ago. He mentioned just wanting to kind of properly diagnose me. I had started to see him a few months prior to that, and we were talking through, different life issues I was having. And so I forget one question he asked about a certain diagnosis, and I didn't relate to it. And then he started, he gave me a sort of this short test about these symptoms. It basically, listed 20, 30, 40, 50, type of symptoms. You check the box of the ones that you deal with, struggle with. And as I'm taking this little evaluation, and then he's reading it back to me, because this was just a quick informal thing, which indicated there's a high likelihood that I had ADHD. And I had no idea that so many of the things that I struggled with in life, and so many of the things I was coming to counseling for, and that I've frankly struggled with for years, some of the things were from ADHD. And that's why I'm doing this episode, because that may be you as well. And I have found a lot of hope in this diagnosis, and then having a plan, a treatment plan with counseling and management, and just being able to find some resources that are helpful, as well as some medication that's helpful, that has helped me a lot with these symptoms that I felt like have had no solution, for a very long time. So I'll get to kind of what some of those are. For me, there's been two kind of phases of my ADHD. How does someone who's 42 get diagnosed with ADHD? So, a year and a half ago, because of this preliminary test with my counselor, he referred me to a local psychologist who only does these ADHD assessments. So it was a 3-hour test. It was wild. It really hurt my brain. Some of it was fun. Some of it was really painful. And, it turns out, yes, I do have ADHD from this formal evaluation. But So for me, there was sort of, I would say, two phases of this in my life. But 4 or 5 years ago, and I've shared this on the podcast before. I believe if you go back to episode 62, would be my story with depression, and I talked through in there a really dark season of my life, dark in the sense of depression, and my brain feels like it just broke. We had a lot of transition going on in our life, and I won't rehash it all here. But from that point on, while I didn't realize it was happening, the ADHD symptoms got a lot worse. That was when, and at one point in that, I also need to say, to give my wife some credit and an apology, during that season, she, and by some of these symptoms, I mean, highly forgetful, needing Post-it notes to remember very basic things, walking through the house to go do something, completely forgetting why I entered that room to do a certain thing, things like that, getting just much, much worse. And she said, maybe you have ADHD. I was really offended by that. And she remembers it, and she remembers it, and her remembering it, I remember it. I was really offended that she would think that I had this. I don't have ADHD. My stereotypical thought of what ADHD was. I'm not hyperactive. I'm not drinking Mountain Dew all the time. I'm not this just kid who can't sit still. All these sorts of things. So she was right. I did have ADHD, but it was during that season that my symptoms got a lot worse. Prior to that, I had symptoms that I did not have any idea what they were from. And now that I have the diagnosis and I can look back, and according to the psychologist that did the test with me that specializes in this, they say that you as an adult, you can't catch it, like you can't get ADHD, and maybe some disagree with that. I don't know. This is just what they were telling me. but you can have it, but your cognitive ability, that's part of this test that you take. It's basically an IQ test along with a bunch of other like kind of categories of that. And then they also test your deficit level. So where your deficit level is at compared to your kind of brain's ability to stay ahead of that is going to determine how strong these symptoms are, which is also why if you're stressed out, your symptoms are going to get worse because your brain in deficit, it's like they're competing with each other on who's going to be on top. And so I never had struggles in school. Kind of the classic ADHD is you're going to struggle in school, but I was always a procrastinator. And so procrastination is a big part of ADHD. Doesn't mean you have it if you're a procrastinator, but maybe it does. And the idea is with ADHD, and another good resource I recommend so I don't forget, the book ADHD is Awesome by Penn, Penn, and Kim Holderness has been a helpful book for me. It puts ADHD in a very positive light. Here's the advantages of having ADHD while being honest about the struggle of it, and lots of good management tips in there. And they talk through some of the science of it as well, of what's different about our brains and all these sorts of things. But with procrastination, the idea is there's something, your brain, I'm not an expert on ADHD, but I know my own experience, and I've gleaned a few things from some of these resources. But your brain wants to do what is new, what is novel, and what is challenging. And that's what lights your brain up. And so and really it's what's urgent. And so what's urgent, that's right in front of me, that's due today, I mean, I need to get that done. But if that thing isn't due until next week, well, why would I need to work on it now when this other thing is more urgent and or more interesting and or more stimulating to my brain? And if you don't have ADHD, you might be judgmental and say, well, then make it more stimulating to your brain, right? Like make your brain activate and be responsible and do the thing that's more important that's due a week from now than this thing that's more interesting to you right now. It doesn't work that way. Your brain literally does not work that way. So it's hard to explain unless you experience it. But knowing that I have it has given my wife a lot of empathy towards me when it comes to cleaning the house, for example. So I've never been able to keep my room clean when I was little, and I've never been able to keep the house clean. I try to do chores to help, the whole love languages thing, acts of service. It's always been a huge contention point in our marriage because I just don't see the things my wife sees. She cares about things being clean, and I don't. And it's because the priority to me, the interesting thing to me, is not if there's some dirt in the corner of the floor. I don't care. It doesn't register to my brain. What registers to my brain is perhaps that the blog post that I'm writing and needing to get this done and wanting to get it out, or whatever it may be. And yeah, it might just be like thinking of my kids, two of the three who have ADHD. ADHD is hereditary. That watching a show on your phone or a video game is more stimulating to your brain, and so your brain is going to go towards the thing that is more stimulating. But these traces of things have been there for me, and then the last 5 years, they've gotten much worse. And so I need to start turning the corner on wrapping this episode up. But I want to do two things. One is just share like what some of these symptoms are that I've experienced that I had no idea were connected to ADHD. And in sharing them, it has helped, like I said, in my marriage. My wife, it's given her a lot of empathy towards me in areas where she was justifiably critical of me, judgmental of me, and I was trying my best. I couldn't do better in these areas, and now there's a shared understanding of why. It's not an excuse to not keep a clean house, but there's an understanding of why that doesn't come naturally, and then a management strategy of, okay, how do we kind of manufacture something that works for my brain? And there's lots of ways of doing that as well. And this is something I have to help my two daughters with that have the same issue. But things like not being able to keep a clean room, keeping things organized, that's a big one. Procrastination is a big one. For me, in the last 5 years, the glare on a TV screen, the glare on a computer screen would really bother me. Sounds. In fact, if you go back and listen to my Noah's rants that I used to do on here, many of them were about sounds, like these birds are chirping or like whatever, and a clock ticking. That's a legitimate thing that drives me nuts. It sounds like an alarm clock in my central nervous system, in my brain, when I hear a clock ticking. When I hear a sound, our HVAC used to tap the walls. I mean, it drives me nuts. I can't help it or control it. And someone chewing gum next to me, if I can hear the gum chewing, if someone's chewing with their mouth open, my cat licking itself across the room. These are all sensory things that attach to my ADHD that I had no explanation for. And so I would ask someone to maybe, not chew gum next to me so loud, or crunch on potato chips so loud. And then I would get judged for being so irritable, so impatient. And now we have an understanding that this is ADHD. When it comes to my work life, man, that part is a struggle. That's a real thing where they call it executive function. It's part of your brain that does tasks that you don't want to do, tasks like a chore, tasks just like things you have to do in life and in your job, checking email, whatever, doing chores, cleaning a house. So that part of my brain struggles, and it's getting worse. I am seeing a new counselor that specializes in ADHD now, which I'm really encouraged about. And I also want to say I'm taking medication, and because I want to be better, I want to feel better. And it took me 4 different medicines before I found one that I didn't have side effects from. Side effects mostly being feeling really irritable on. So if you've tried ADHD medicine and you didn't feel like yourself, I would ask you to keep trying. Talk to your doctor. I even talked to a psychiatrist to get someone who really was an expert in the side effect area, and I found something that works for me. Another huge another huge symptom that I've always struggled with, had no idea was ADHD, was not being able to get out of bed in the morning. And so the alarm clock goes off, and I feel like there's a truck on my chest. I just cannot get out of bed. And once I'm out of bed, I feel super depressed. And a lot of my depression symptoms in those morning hours, and I was taking depression medicine for this, drinking tons of coffee. So that's another sign. If you're drinking tons and tons of coffee, caffeine, or other forms of caffeine, like maybe Mountain Dew or energy drinks, you are essentially self-medicating with a stimulant. Back to ADHD. The deficit piece is that you can't focus on something. Your system shuts down. It's like unplugging an electronic device. It goes boo. So you're drinking caffeine to try to stimulate yourself. Well, that's what the medicine does for me now. So when I wake up in the morning, I take my medicine. I don't have to drink any caffeine. I don't have to drink any coffee at all. And that feeling like a truck is on my chest, like there's a wet blanket over my brain, like I'm grumpy, I'm lethargic, I can't function until 11 o'clock, all of that is gone. So I still have a lot of ADHD issues and symptoms. The medicine doesn't fix everything. But for me, it really, really fixed that. And I'm really, really thankful for that. Some of the other symptoms can be really difficult things like really big emotions. So I can feel really big emotions when it comes to sadness, when it comes to anger, when it comes to excitement, all those sorts of things. But it becomes a real issue in life when I'm feeling overstimulated. If let's say I'm cooking dinner and I have 5 things going at once, the different side dishes and, sort of thing, and then my kids need something, I'm overstimulated. And if you feel yourself that way a lot, you feel yourself overstimulated a lot, and you can't just take one more stimulus in or your brain just kind of explodes. That's an ADHD symptom as well. Random kind of bouts of rage. For me, it doesn't, not towards my kids, thankfully, not when people are around, but that can happen to me when I'm frustrated and something that isn't going my way. So these are all things that, I have ADHD, which is why these 5-minute flips aren't ever 5 minutes. I mean, I couldn't do anything in 5 minutes, but 20 is a bit much. I need to wrap this up. Those symptoms I give you, those are just some of the things that I have wrestled with ADHD that Maybe you do too, and maybe it's worth having a conversation with a counselor about it, in the sense of finding some of the hope and help, like I said, that I have been able to experience from it. And lastly, I found great comfort in some, there's some meditations on the Calm app, which you can get a free trial of and listen to, on ADHD. And there's something really healing when you hear someone else with ADHD say that they have it too and that it's okay, and to be told that your brain is beautiful and there's that it's good, that you're good. There's a lot of shame that I carry with these ADHD symptoms that I have that feel outside of my control. And so I just want to affirm you, if you are in the struggle of ADHD and it is really messing with your life, to check out some of these resources. And I hope just me sharing a little bit of my story helps with that. And I'll close with this. The ADHD is Awesome book does a great job with this. You also can go to YouTube, go to the Holderness family. They do YouTube. That's like what they do. They have a whole bunch of great ADHD videos. Most of them are really corny and funny. And you can watch some of those and just be encouraged. But one of the great discoveries for me in the last 5 years with this ADHD thing, I've told you that I've been working on a science fiction book, and I absolutely love it. And with ADHD, you can find where your brain hyperfocuses. And for me, the hyperfocus, while I can't read nonfiction anymore like I used to, which is really bizarre, and I'm a pastor, so that's an issue. It's hard to read the Bible. It's hard to read the way I used to read. I can't explain it. Even fiction books have to be really, really active for me to stay engaged with them beyond the beginning of the book. I can get bored really easily. I can do audiobooks, which is good, so I do a lot of that. But my hyper-focus area, I stumbled upon it. My brothers encouraged me to start a hobby, and so I said, well, like a creative hobby. And I said, I like writing. I've written nonfiction. I never felt like I could write a fiction book. And I sat down just with the beginning scene in my brain, and I started typing. That was July of 3 years ago. And I have discovered my most favorite brain space to be in is writing my fiction book, writing science fiction. I've been working on it for 3 years. It's in a deep, very slow editing process now with me and several beta readers and editors. But that is still my favorite brain space. And I can't wait to be in it more. It's one of the reasons I'm raising the support I mentioned in episode 111 to create more space for my writing. And the book is finished. We're just trying to get it finished editing and as good as it can be before I go out to send it off to some agents. But I celebrate my ADHD that allowed me to write that book and that allowed me to discover this amazing hobby and joy, just a pure joy in life that I never would have had before. So that's a bit of my ADHD story. I hope that it encourages you. If you have anyone in your life that has ADHD, I just ask you to be empathetic. I'd encourage you to read or listen to ADHD is Awesome. You need to become an empathizer if you're a parent or a spouse of somebody with ADHD, because, man, it will really, really benefit your relationship with that person if you can empathize and understand why they're doing some of the things they're doing and the weight that they are carrying. So that's my encouragement to you. Thanks for listening to this very long 5-minute flip. I will see you next time on the flip side.
Thanks for listening to this 5-minute flip. Subscribe for more flips and long-form episodes of The Flip Side. Visit www.patreon.com/NoahFilippiak to support and get sweet Flipside swag.